What's going on, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another video, and today I want to talk for a little bit about Alperen Sengun and the Houston Rockets. Also, yes, at the moment I'm in a hotel. I'm currently out of town, so if videos are a little bit sporadic over the next few days, that's why. Hopefully the audio and lighting are good enough for the moment. It does feel a little bit echoey, but I'll try and fix some of that. Anyways, let's talk about Sengun and the Rockets. So at the moment, Houston is in the midst of one of their best seasons in a while. Currently, they have a record of 28-35, which has them tied with the Utah Jazz for the 11th best record in the Western Conference. It's not a phenomenal record by any means, but it's way better than they've been in the past. I mean, every year from when they traded James Harden until now, up until this season, they were either the 15th seed in the Western Conference or they were tied for the 15th seed. So the fact that they are the first team out of the plane at the moment is actually a big time improvement. And honestly, that's really all I wanted to see from Houston this season. I didn't need to see them be a play-in team or a playoff squad because I didn't think they were going to be. I just wanted to see them make some type of improvement after being kind of stuck for the past few years. And they've done exactly that, and it's been for a number of reasons. One of the bigger ones is the addition of Ime Udoka as their head coach, coming in for Stephen Silas, who by the end of his tenure was pretty much consensus one of the worst coaches in the league, if not the worst. Just didn't know how to utilize the talent, let them build up a lot of bad habits, a lot of really questionable decisions. So Ime Udoka comes in, who was the head coach of the Celtics when they went to the finals a couple years ago, and immediately shifted the culture, got them to buy into this defensive identity. It feels like they're way more of a team now than just a bunch of individuals out there on the court. It's been impressive what he's done in just 60 games up to this point. The Rockets front office also brought in some veterans for this team, like Jeff Green, Dillon and Fred VanVleet. Dillon has been fantastic for them for a majority of this season. There are still those moments where the terrible shot selection pops up, but for the most part, he's reined it in a little bit. The three-point shot has been more efficient than it's been in the past, and he's still playing some really high-level defense, a big reason why they're as good as they are on that end. And then Fred VanVleet comes in as a new lead guard. He's been really good for them playmaking, and it's helped elevate the game of a lot of guys around him. He's not an all-star level player anymore, but Fred VanVleet still brings a lot to the table. And then Jeff Green's just been a nice veteran for them to have there in the locker room, so that's been a good thing that they went ahead and done last offseason. They've also had some development and contributions from the young guys, like Jabari Smith Jr. is having a really underrated second season, really developing into this glue guy, this high-level defender, a guy that can knock down three balls, even attack off the dribble a little bit, grabbing a ton of rebounds as of late. Really like his trajectory. They're getting high-level contributions from rookies too, like Thompson, who's already a high-level defender in his first season, a really solid playmaker. The only thing he can't do at the moment is knock down a consistent jumper, and if eventually he develops that, there's not a lot of ways to stop him because simultaneously, he's one of the best athletes I've ever seen on a basketball court. I swear when he jumps, he literally levitates. Cam Whitmore has been great for them as a bit of a scoring punch, which is kind of the main thing he does at this moment. He doesn't do a ton outside of scoring, but hey, that's what this team needs. That's what he brings to the table, and I think he could give them a great offensive punch for years to come. So guys like that have been key to their success, as well as the veterans. And a number of other players we could talk about, like Aaron Holiday has been pretty solid for them this season so far, but one guy that I think is the biggest reason for why the Rockets have emerged the way they have is Alperen Sengun. Back in the 2021 draft, the Houston Rockets landed Alperen Sengun after a trade with Oklahoma City to pick up the 16th pick in that class. And after drafting him, Sengun had a really solid rookie season and a really impressive sophomore year last year, where he looked like the Rockets' best player a lot of nights, despite being very underutilized by Stephen Silas. This is something that was a big topic all throughout last season, I know, with Rockets fans and really just basketball fans in general. Whenever you watch the Rockets, it was very clear that when they ran the game through Sengun, let him be the offensive hub, ran actions through him at the elbow, or let him get post-up opportunities, just basically let Alp cook. Whenever he did that, the Rockets looked way better, and when he wasn't doing that, they looked pretty much like the worst team in the entire NBA, and for some reason, they hardly ever went to him, but despite that, he still put up 15 points, 9 rebounds, and 4 assists a night, again, looking more often than not, when he was given opportunities, the best player on the teime. However, with Silas getting fired in the offseason, it felt like this could be a big year for Sengun's development. Of course, he was just going into his third season, he had more talent around him, and now Ime Udoka came in, who seemingly was going to put him in a spot to succeed as a really good coach. So it felt like a Sengun breakout was inevitable, and he's done exactly that. On the season as a whole, Sengun is putting up 21.2 points per game, 9.4 rebounds, 5 assists, 1.2 steals, while shooting 54% from the field, 28.4% from deep, and 70.7% from the line. He's been their leading scorer this season by a full 3 points per game, their leading rebounder, their second leading assister, and the overall centerpiece of their offense. They run so much through Sengun, whether he's doing dribble handoffs, he's working at the elbow, they put him in the post, post and let him back some guy down. If they send a double, he's always making the right play, it feels like. He's quickly developing into a really solid offensive hub for this young Rockets team. Not to mention, he's currently playing the best basketball of his entire career. Against the Spurs a few days ago, he did have the best game of his career with a 45 point, 16 rebound, 3 assists, 5 steal, and block performance, while shooting 19 of 32 from the field, including 2 of 3 from 3. It was a masterclass, an extremely impressive game, especially because a lot of what he did went up against Victor Wembanyama, who's already one of the hardest players in the entire league to score on consistently. He did a great job of going into Wemby's chest, letting him avoid that ridiculous wingspan, which typically blocks anything in its radius. He's got elite footwork, some of the best in the league, and he used that to keep both Wemby and Zach Collins off balance. He was knocking down that little one-legged mid-range jumper that he likes to shoot, which I don't understand how he keeps the balance on that, but hey, if it goes in, it goes down. He was extremely impressive. The best game of his career, both statistically and in terms of just impressing me. When I was watching him out there, it genuinely felt like he couldn't miss, and everything he was doing was just working, again, against both Wemby and Zach Collins, which is a pretty solid defensive front court out there. It was a masterclass. It showcased why Alperen Sengun is so special of a talent, and he followed it up with another great game a couple of nights ago against the Clippers in James Harden's return to Houston. Sengun went out there and kind of stole the show. 23 points, 19 rebounds, and 14 dimes with 2 steals on 10 of 19 shooting. It did come in a loss, but the Rockets were leading for a lot of that game, and the biggest reason why was Sengun. He was taking full advantage of the lack of size that the Clippers have, setting up pretty much everything offensively. Again, a really impressive display of just dominating the game in pretty much every facet on that offensive end. It was his second triple-double of the season, his 29th double-double, and one of the better games of his career as a whole. And these two performances, which may be the two best we've ever seen from him, came on back-to-back nights. At this point, I kind of just expect Sengun to go out there and have fantastic games consistently. Like last night against Portland in a win, he had 19 points, 9 rebounds, and 6 assists with a steal and a block, and that's a really good stat line, but it's just kind of typical for him at this point. It wasn't the most impressive thing in the world because he set the bar really high for himself. He's established himself as one of the core pieces of this Rockets team going forward, and it feels like he can definitely be a multiple-time all-star level talent. In fact, if you ask a lot of people, they'll probably tell you that Alperen Sengun to them is the guy that's going to lead the Rockets back to championship contention and could maybe end up someday being the best player on a team that wins the title. If you believe that, I don't blame you. Sengun is doing ridiculous stuff as a 21-year-old, and it makes a lot of sense for him to continue to be the guy for this team when right now he's easily their best player. And that would be huge for the Rockets because right now you don't really know who outside of Sengun can be that guy. Jalen Green hasn't quite worked out yet. He's had some flashes, so maybe he can turn it around. Jabari Smith Jr. feels to me like a bit of a more complimentary guy, that elite glue guy rather than the cornerstone piece. And the jury is still out on Thompson and Cam Whitmore. They're both rookies, so we'll see how they develop. So if Sengun is that franchise guy, that's huge for the Rockets. But while Sengun is absolutely their best player and has a really bright future ahead of him, I'm still not quite sold that he can be the guy they build around to win a championship. Don't get me wrong, he's absolutely amazing. It's just not often that a big man of his mold is the centerpiece for a championship team, and more often than not, you've got to have a guy that's at an MVP caliber level to win that award, and I'm just not quite sure Sengun's going to reach that level. Sengun's game reminds me a lot of Domantas Sabonis. They're both really skilled interior bigs with playmaking chops, high-level rebounding, and with Sabonis, he's a player that's already made a number of All-Star games, which I think is an incredible outcome for Sengun if he reaches that point, and it's very, very possible. But Sabonis isn't a player I look at as someone that can be the number one guy in a championship team. He's got a pretty limited outside game like Sengun does at the moment, and he doesn't really bring any interior level protection to that team. Again, like Sengun doesn't at the moment. Maybe Sengun eventually develops that, but for the moment, that's kind of the trajectory I see him on. And if he reaches that level, again, as a multi-time All-Star, maybe even an All-NBA player at some point, that's an amazing outcome. Really, the only big in the mold of these two guys that we've seen be the best player on a championship team has been Nikola Jokic. And I've seen a lot of people compare Sengun to Jokic over the course of his career, which makes sense. They've got somewhat similar play styles as these playmaking offensive hub bigs. But I don't think people realize how good Nikola Jokic is. It's impossible basically to become what the Joker has become because there's never been a player that's been like him up to this point in the history of the league until he got here. He's a multiple-time MVP, might be a 3-time MVP after this season, the best big of his generation, one of the best offensive players, period, in the history of the league regardless of position, the best passing big of all time, and has a good chance to go down as a top 15, 20 player of all time when it's all said and done. And there's a real shot he ends up as top 10 all time if you rack up some more accolades while the Denver Nuggets are still really good like they are at the moment. So trying to compare Sengun to a guy like that, to me, feels like a bit of a disservice because I think it's nearly impossible for him to reach that level because nobody else has been at the level of Jokic with the way that he plays in the history of the game. So if he doesn't become Jokic, that's completely fine. I just feel like a lot of people are setting him up for some unrealistic standards when I see those comparisons. So I think Sengun is an amazing talent who really does not get enough credit for the amazing things he's been doing so far this season and doesn't get discussed enough as one of the brightest young featured bigs in the entire NBA. I don't know if he's quite going to be that franchise cornerstone, like the best player on a title team for Houston. And if he isn't, the question is, who is going to reach that point? And that's part of what inspired me to make this video. I was watching the Rockets play the Clippers, James Harden's return, and it had me thinking, who's going to be that next superstar for the Houston Rockets? Maybe I'm wrong and it is Alperen Sengun. I would love to be wrong about this and he does become that player. That would be amazing to see and I'm really rooting for his success. But if it isn't him, is it someone else on the roster? Like, could it end up being Jalen Green, who has shown flashes, but has really struggled to put it all together? I wouldn't really bet on him becoming that player, but I guess there is an outside shot. Cam Whitmore, Jabari Smith Jr. are interesting, although I think they're a bit more complementary pieces than that star guy. Maybe it's Thompson. If I had to bet on somebody on this roster becoming that player, I would probably look at Amon specifically because like I talked about earlier, he's got all the physical tools, the athleticism, the defense is already there, the playmaking is really solid. Really, if that jumper can come along, I think he can be one of the most special players in the league, make all defensive teams while giving you high-level offensive production as well. I'm a big believer in Amon's game, and to me, he is the guy with the most upside on this entire roster, so maybe it ends up being him, but if it isn't, is it maybe they pick up someone in a trade? Say Sengun becomes a great number 2 and they add someone else to that team and they form a tandem there that eventually does lead them to a championship. I mean, they've got all the Brooklyn picks coming up, already going to have a great pick this year in the lottery because of Brooklyn. So maybe they package some of those picks, some of the young guys that don't quite pan out in some salary and add a superstar at some point. Maybe it's like a Luka Doncic. Say the Mavericks don't make the playoffs this year and he starts to get a bit disgruntled. He likes living in Texas, but the Mavericks front office really isn't doing it for him. Houston could probably put together a pretty compelling offer. And I'm not saying Luka's going to get traded or anything. I just think that's a potential avenue where they land a superstar through a trade using all the assets they've accrued over the course of this rebuild. And then you use some of the young guys you still have on the roster, like maybe you keep Jabari, Sengun, and you build a high-level title team that way. There are a lot of different avenues the Rockets can go down. And to me, they're one of the more interesting teams in the league because they've taken that next step. They become a playing squad. The question is, where do they go from here to reach that next level and join the high-level young cores like the Oklahoma City Thunder, the Orlando Magic, who right now are pushing for a top 4 seed in the Eastern Conference? How do they take that next step? And maybe it is just more development behind Sengun and Thompson, the rest of these guys, or maybe it's a big-time deal. They're in a really interesting spot at the moment, and I think Sengun and the discourse surrounding him is at the centerpiece of it all. So yeah, I think that's all I have to say about the topic for the moment. Let me know what your thoughts are on Sengun and the Rockets. I want to give him one more shout out because what he's been doing this season has really been ridiculous. He's improving at a rapid rate, and I can't wait to see where Sengun's career goes. I didn't make this video just to say that he can't be the number 1 option on a championship team. I wanted to talk about how good he's been and let people know, but also go a little bit into some of the conversations surrounding him and the Houston Rockets, because I do think they're in a really intriguing spot at the moment. But let me know if you think he can eventually be the number 1 guy for this team on a championship squad, or do you think they need to add another piece? Do you think it's someone else on the roster that can eventually reach that point? Maybe they draft someone this year. Is there anybody that you're looking at for the Rockets with that Brooklyn pick? Do you think they should trade it? Would love to know all your thoughts down below in the comments, but for right now, I appreciate y'all watching. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. I'll see y'all later. Real one, say it back.